This is a backgrounder to the AICPA's Audit Data Standard and XBRL GL as its fulfillment. Some of the issues we faced. So let's move forward in that background, and then I'll show you some of the work we've been doing and how that fits in with some of the work of the XBRL GL working group. To begin, the AICPA Audit Data Standard is in its final stages of preparation. I provided a link to you. Again, if you just do a little search for AICPA quote Audit Data Standard, it'll take you to the July 18th draft information about the project as well. An exposure draft came out on July 18th. Comments were requested by September 17th, and the group has been responding to those comments and doing some updates since then. It's overseen by the AICPA's Assurance Services Executive Committee, developed by the Emerging Assurance Technology Task Force. The comment period ended fall 2012, and I believe that in around 2 weeks in Palm Springs or Palm Beach or something with a palm in it, they'll be continuing to move things forward from a technical and ruling standpoint. The Audit Data Standard has been around in, or at least some prior versions of it. If you look in particular at the General Ledger-oriented data standards and the AICPA Audit Data Standard, and again, perhaps it would be helpful for me to say that the AICPA's representatives thought that it would perhaps be very helpful if there was a standard format for pulling certain files from the General Ledger and then accounts receivable systems. They're in the current draft, others to come, in a standardized format. When you ask for the General Ledger journal entries or chart of accounts or customer master, to have a very prescriptive format for doing that. If you look at the definitions and some of the other things, you'll find out that much of it was based on and inspired by XBRL GL from a long time ago. A precursor on top of XBRL GL was developed by the Center for Audit Quality in 2005, and now this new version representing around a dozen different files, questions that auditors might ask their clients to make sure they understand the data. This is, as I say, in its current process moving along and due to be published in the not-too-distant future. This is the dozen or so different files that are represented. From the exposure draft, you can see that they're listed under GL and AR. In the current draft that I have, they've done a little bit more maneuvering for some things that are standardized and pulling them out, but you can see a GL detail, a trial balance, chart of accounts, source journal listings, open invoices, activity, new invoices, customer master, invoice and payment types. Questionnaires aren't data files per se, but there's some ways to ask for information, again, some minor alterations in the current version from that exposure draft. If you look at that, you'll see that each file, for example, the prescriptive customer master file, has a series of fields. You can see 8 of them on the screen. You see some field names, and these are the field names if you create the Audit Data Standard file using the delimited text file, currently considered to be pipe delimited. If you have a US keyboard, the pipe is that little thing, normally in 2 segments that go up and down, often right above your right enter key, but could be in various other places on the keyboard. Levels 1 and 2 being the next column, being whether they really, really want it or whether they would just really like it. Text or numerics or other things providing the data type. Length in the delimited format being a maximum field length. Description being a description of the concept. But in between the caption that I miss, XBRL GL taxonomy element, the group agreed to represent the Audit Data Standard both with a delimited or pipe delimited format and also with XBRL GL. Been working on representing some sample data, and I'm going to be showing you in XBRL GL some of these, but what you see on the screen is to the left the fields of the audit data standard or the delimited format, and then 3 samples representing different types of customers. Customer AAA being Arnold's Amazing Anteaters. You see addresses and billing information, activity dates, primary contacts, Barbara's Bodacious Bouquets, and B. Camden Candy Corner. In pink, you can see certain information that needs to be transformed. Right now, Ohio or New Jersey, Pennsylvania, United States or Canada, for the file being transformed into the ISO 3166-1 or 2 formats. You can see some dates. The dates would be transformed to ISO 8601. You can see some numbers in the ADS text format. They want percentages to be spelled out, so 20% would be 20 rather than 0.2. So some transformation goes on and then gets turned into the various formats. What you see on the screen is the representation of that same data, here using a tab delimited format. That's why there's spaces between each of the things you see. The alternative would be the pipe, again, that being on the right-hand side, in 2 segments, one on top of the other, and be a little bit more difficult to read because you wouldn't have the spaces, but it's very concise, and that makes it small and easy to use. The goal, and again, we do not necessarily recommend Altova over other products, but this just being a picture from Altova MapForce, as you've seen many presentations from us in the past, showing the lossless transformation from the text format to XBRL GL and hopefully backwards when it's at the minimum. And here's a little bit of that customer master file is represented in XBRL GL. So the audit data standard representing a standard set of approximately 12 proscribed formats. Let me move you off to how we hope to show how XBRL GL as the fulfillment has some great benefit. Of course, using XBRL GL as a representation of the data, but those of you who've been with us for some time also know we've been talking about something called XBRL GL profiles, and having 12 proscribed file formats has given us a real good opportunity to really begin to test that out and develop some prototypes. So developing some standard rules, which can be instantiated either with XBRL formula for the initial purpose here. I'm using something called schematron instead, but it would be something standardized and external to those formats, so you could use whatever you want, using labels and standardizing the mapping, using something we've had within XBRL GL but haven't given a lot of highlights to, something called the data definition file, XBRL GL DDF. Let me show you what some of those things look like. And let's start with the easy one, again, XBRL GL. XBRL GL is our holistic and generic representation of data. There's no short quiz next period on what you see on the screen, but this is that data represented in XBRL GL. We can, of course, press the F7 key to find out that the data is well formed. We can press the F8 key to find out that it meets the basic validation rules of XBRL GL. I had mentioned, though, that with profiles, we want to be able to provide an additional set of rules. And when we're trying to conform to something like the ADS, we may want to capture certain things. We may want to make sure, for example, that there's only one accounting entry structure in a file, that the document info section for customer masters would use the enumerated field account, that you have certain fields that are required, that they all exist so we can test their existence, their level 1 fields. And so using these series of assertions of tests and reports that get bundled together into different sets of rules, that get brought together into patterns that can be reused for different purposes, we can bring together and help constrain the XBRL GL so that it's exactly what the consumer may expect. And we can, using standardized tools, and Gianluca and I will be showing you some of these implementations in the future. I know that the FASB uses a product called Oxygen, which does schematron validation. There's a product called Validator Buddy from XML Tools and others that can apply these and do that additional testing. So with a fixed length or delimited text file, you have to develop special programming to do testing because you know what you're doing with XBRL because you can very easily, with your XBRL, use XPath to discover information. So I want to find something related to, go back to my, how do I know anything about identifier cities? I can just go to a simple tool like this and say, okay, great, what am I dealing with? It tells you all the language you need to know. You can build your sets of rules based on the standardized language. XBRL GL is the standardized data. XPath is a standardized way of referring to the data. Schematron is an ISO standard for making assertions and tests against that data. We can have a very standardized way to make sure that the data is everything that it should be. So we have our schematron. I mentioned the data definition file. This is an example of the XBRL GL data definition file. It lets us say that we're going to be working with a series of data. It's delimited. It is tab delimited. And then with that tab delimited, be able to say for each field that you find in a particular order for delimited file or for a particular size and a starting location, what's the XBRL GL field and what are any additional constraints that you might require. And XBRL GL DDF will then let you catalog from fixed length ASCII or delimited files to XBRL GL and be able to express any of the information. Finally, mentioned being able to also bring along labels because people who are working with the audit data standard may prefer, for some reason, to see the labels that are provided in the audit data standard rather than XBRL GL standard labels or something else more readable. It's very easy, and again, this is that same customer master file. You can see in the beginning of that file where I've done the additional link-based reference that lets me bring in additional labels that can override or supplement those in the underlying schemas. And so we can make it so that when you look at the data and you create a printout, you have no clue whether what you're looking at came from the delimited format or the XBRL GL. In other words, XBRL GL can be a pretty perfect chameleon for any prescribed format. You can bring in all the sets of rules. You can bring in labels to match it. And you can make sure that XBRL GL has no loss compared to any other formats, plus a lot of additional power when it comes to validation, helping people create what they need, and of course being able to validate, query, reuse, and transform the data, all using standardized approaches, using things like schematron that I'm not a programmer, but I understand XBRL GL with the help of tools like XML Spy and others. I understand XPath, and schematron is fairly reasonable. Again, XBRL formula will have some additional benefits, especially if you're doing some testing between XBRL GL and XBRL financial reporting files as well. So we're going to be fleshing this out for the rest of the audit data standard. We'll be looking to the XBRL GL working group for its assessment. And on top of everything else, you'll be seeing a document in the very, very near future called Using XBRL GL to Fulfill the AICPA Audit Data Standard. This document speaks to the XBRL GL philosophy. It speaks to XBRL profiles, talks about reusable data, and lays down the rules of file naming, versioning, field headers, text number, date formats, enumerated values, coding standards, dealing with required fields, differences in structuring issues, dealing with optional information, and some other topics that will be added to this in the near future. Hopefully with all of these tools, the XBRL GL Working Group will be able to both help in the establishment of the audit data standard and set a very, very high bar for any future areas, the SAFT from the OECD being one, where we want to leverage the best of standards. We want to be able to proscribe, make sure that the XBRL GL can meet exactly the needs and can be validated to meet the needs, where you can communicate the exact fields that should be used, as some people have been concerned in the fact that XBRL GL is too generic, too holistic, and too flexible. XBRL GL profiles with the tools that you've just seen will help us to make XBRL GL, we believe, the best solution out there for all of these different things. So that's my 15 minutes. Let me open the floor for any questions. And again, for right now, the questions would be recorded. You can do the Q&A if you prefer, or if you want, we can shut down the recording and you can answer questions at a later time. So let me open it for questions during the recording time. Okay. Well, great. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to thank those who are listening with us at some future time. I'm going to stop the recording, save the recording, and hopefully